Welcome to episode 11 of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary, with Kristen
and Catherine, where we believe there's nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club where we take one book a month and dive into all the drama, adventure, and romance we can find. Hey, Kristen.
Hi, Catherine. So, I guess because we are moving into our second week of Shadow and Bone, we thought for today's episode we would discuss all the different types of Grisha that exist in the Grishaverse and which one we would like to be if we had the choice.
Yeah.
So the first sort of category of Grisha are the Corporalki, or the Order of the Living Dead. So the Corporalki focus mostly their power on the human body, and they wear red keftas. And obviously, each type of Corporalki is further distinguished using like thread, like the embroidery on the cuffs is the color that goes with each one. So it's very distinct on how to tell them apart. So the first, I guess, subset of Corporalki are Heartrenders. So they use their power to damage somebody's internal organs or slow or quicken their pulse, somebody's pulse or their heartbeat. They can also snatch air from their lungs. Essentially, they're great to have in battle, which is why I think a lot of the darkling's personal guard are Corporalki. We also have healers. So they obviously, like the name implies, they use their power to heal others. So they can mend bones, heal wounds, those sorts of things. And then we have our last subset of Corporalki are tailors. So they have the ability to subtly alter somebody's appearance. Which one of those speaks to you?
It's kind of hard because, like, being a tailor sounds super cool. And especially since you can do it to yourself. Like, you can change your own appearance. So I think that one would be kind of fun. But then I'm also Heartrender would be probably the actual one that I would go with. Just think it'd be useful. You don't want to talk to someone anymore. You just slow their pulse and they're like, whoa, I feel faint. You're like, oh, you should sit down. I need to leave.
Yeah. I agree. It's sort of like one of those things of what do you actually think you're going to need it for? Like in the real world, do I think, like the way our lives are right now, do I think I would need to be a Heartrender? No. But if we're talking about what we would rather be in this Grishaverse, I would totally pick to be a Heartrender.
Yeah, for sure.
But if we were living in our world, yes, I think Taylor is probably most, the most interesting choice.
Yeah. So the second grouping of Grisha is Etherealki, or the Order of Summoners. So that's Grisha whose power lies in the manipulation of different elements. And they wear blue keftas. So there are obviously different subsets of these as well. Squallers manipulate the wind by raising or lowering air pressure. Inferni manipulate fire by gathering combustible particles of substance like methane or hydrogen. But they do need to have a spark to start it. So they need something on them that is able to create a spark so that they can actually make the fire. And tide makers can manipulate water. And then there are the special cases like Shadow Summoner, like the Darkling, and Sun Summoner, which is Alina. So which one would you want to be out of these?
I think both of us have natural sort of we're naturally drawn to water sort of things just because we live so close to it and we both like love the creatures in it. So the tide maker is obviously
Hmm.
I think where I would prefer to be. Other than that, I like the sound of the Inferni, but having to have like a lighter on me at all times so that I could create the spark to manipulate the fire, I don't like that idea.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm the exact same answer. Like maybe shadow summoner sounds kind of cool. Being able to like summon shadows and like creep around and nobody see you. That that sounds cool too, but like
I love how all of your answers revolve around not talking to people. It's like
nobody will see me. Yeah, basically.
how can I avoid talking to the most people?
Basically. But yeah, I think I'd pick Tidemaker as well. Definitely.
So the last section um, of Grisha are the materialki. So they are the order of fabricators. So their power sort of focuses on composite materials. So they wear purple keftas. There are sort of two different subsections of those: the jurists, and they can manipulate solid material, and the alchemy, which can manipulate chemicals. So, I mean, not much choice between those two, but
Yeah. That one this is just hard anyway. I don't think I know enough about the two different groups to even decide. Um but like I think alchemy sounds more interesting maybe, but not 100% sure on these ones.
oh no, I would totally like to be a durist and
Yeah?
manipulate solids. Yeah. Well,
Fair.
just think like you could have like a solid like a rock or a piece of wood or anything and be like,
Mm.
I'll just turn you into what I need to.
Yeah, that's fair.
I
I'm
would
thinking
never
more.
need yeah, I would never need to hire a handyman again.
That's true. Yeah. Yes, alchemy
Um
is more like you could literally make gold out of.
oh, that's a good point.
I can hire all the handyman I ever want and not pay for it.
That's a good point. Okay, so this is part 2 of 4 of Shadow and Bone. We are discussing today chapters 6 to 12.
Yeah, and just a heads up, we're not a spoiler-free zone, and things might get a little saucy. Yeah, so last week we kind of ended with Alina arriving at the little palace, and she had been on her journey for quite a few days of travel. She was exhausted from being on a horse, and they show her to her room, and she just immediately goes to bed because she is absolutely exhausted. So these chapters start with a dream, and it's Alina and Mal, and they're at Kremzen, which is the town, I guess, where they grew up, and the orphanage that they grew up is in this town. And she tries to go to her bedroom, but then basically there's just blood and Volcra, and everything is awful there. And she wakes up and she's terrified. She almost falls back to sleep, and then there's a pounding on the door. And a beautiful but impatient Grisha kind of sweeps in, and she's wearing a cream colored kefta, which
Which
we haven't heard about a cream colored kefta before.
nope.
That's interesting. So this Grisha is Jenya, and she is very insistent. Basically, marches in, tells her to get her ass in gear, and she needs to meet the king basically in less than an hour. So she needs a bath, is her biggest issue now. Um, So after her bath, Jenya kind of looks at her face closely, and she heals a bruise that Alina has on her face. And this is kind of when Jenya gets into talking that she's a tailor and she's in the same group as the healers, but it's kind of different. And like we talked about, it's more cosmetic than obviously healers are healing things, as the name implies. Um, so Alina isn't really excited to have her face changed at all. And she does eventually kind of just agree to it. And she sees that Jenya is like very relieved to the point that Alina kind of wonders what would have happened if she refused her, which kind of gives some insight into Jenya's station in this whole thing. Um, there was a line, I guess, that the darkling cares about the power you bring, not the looks, and the king is more into how beautiful you are. So that's just a bit of an insight into the differences between the two of them and what they care about. So Jenya gets rid of Alina's dark eye circles. She kind of adds some makeup, it seems like a bit of blush, and she brightens her hair. And Alina notes that she still isn't pretty, but she's improved. And she kind of thinks that she wants Mal to see her because, as we know from last week, she got a big dirty crush on him.
Can I just say I really like I love how I love Jenya's process for tailoring. Like
Mm,
she can't just fix you all willy-nilly. Like she needs something to like look at as a sort of a like she brings in a kit of stuff,
hmm.
and it's like when she goes to put blush on Alina's cheeks, she needs like
A pink flower. I can't
yeah,
remember if that's exactly what it is, but yeah.
like she needs like a petal from a flower, and it's almost like she takes the color from the petal and like puts it on her cheeks. So like she
Yeah.
can't just magically make it, which is
Hmm.
an interesting take on sort of quote unquote magic,
Yeah.
because they keep saying, well, it's not magic, it's the small science. We just can manipulate like atoms and stuff and small particles.
Hmm.
And I like that this is sort of an extension of that. Like she can't make color appear on your cheeks, but she can take it from something else and sort of manipulate it onto you. It
Yeah.
doesn't last forever, but
It lasts
I
longer than
just,
makeup,
yeah,
which
true
is pretty
story.
cool.
Mm,
Jenya also tells her that it's the best she can do with kind of the time that she has, and that it's probably a good thing not to get too much attention from the king. And Alina seems very perceptive of other people's emotions, and she kind of sees a shadow cross Jenya's face. And I guess this is just a bit of foreshadowing for
yeah,
a bit later.
yeah,
So they dress Alina in an army uniform, and she's a bit disappointed in the look
yeah.
because, yeah,
She said she wanted a kefta, right?
yeah, yeah, which is understandable. You'd think that's what you'd be going out in. You're the sun summoner, you're the chosen one.
Yeah,
Um, Jenya basically explains it's a packaging to sell to the king. They kind of want to show that she's a part of the first army, his army, as they call it, because she was human, and that's what the first army is made up of. And they don't want it to look like the Darkling has kind of been hiding her from the king all along, and that she's always been a Grisha,
yeah.
because she hasn't, as we all know.
Which is genius, really, on his
Mm,
part.
yeah.
Like, that's very smart. I would not have I wouldn't have the mind for like court politics.
Mm. I guess he's been around for a
I know.
while, so he still, I wouldn't either. Jenya also explains that she's not supposed to tailor Grisha, which is interesting because she's kind of been ordered to tailor Alina. But she basically works for the queen, and that's the only person that she's supposed to tailor, um, which is wild.
Other than
And
herself.
yeah, I guess. I don't know. She's probably not supposed to tailor herself, but
I don't think she can stop her, though.
no. Well, yeah. Um, so they get to, I guess, where they're going to enter from, basically. And there's a bit of like an argument over who Alina should walk in with
Yeah.
because the I think the between the corporality and the ethereality, they're kind of like she should walk with us because she's a summoner, and then the other group's like, well, she should walk with us because we're the more powerful ones. And anyway, Alina suggests that she goes with Jenya, and we get another clue, I guess, that Jenya's kind of seen as lower among the Grisha because they kind of just laugh that idea off. And the Darkling ends up coming in and saying that Alina is going to walk with him, which is like completely unsurprising. I don't know why everyone
Yeah.
else thought that she would walk in with a group.
Yeah.
um, and we also get another little bit about Jenya. She's very unique in her gift, and I guess you can kind of decide in which order, like where you're better, and kind of focus your training on that. Kind of seems like so. I guess they kind of saw that Jenya was good at what they call tailoring now, and then like just had her work on that so that she could be basically a gift to the queen, um, which doesn't sound very good.
No. And a gift from the darkling. Like the darkling placed her there.
Yeah.
She doesn't get to leave. She, she's essentially just the queen's tailor at all times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Alina is walking in with the darkling, and he tells her that the king will want a demonstration. And she is understandably completely overwhelmed by this because she doesn't know how to make her magic work. She doesn't know what she's doing, and she doesn't even think she can do anything. So he kind of just reminds her that being a failure would just reflect poorly on him, and he's not going to let that happen. So as they're walking in, we see the first sign of the apparate, and he even kind of looks creepy, I think is a bit of foreshadowing. He looks priest-like. Um, I guess she gets in front of the king next, and he calls her plain, which is, I thought, very funny. And Jenya's probably happy about that. But like, if she's plain now, what would she have been if she walked in without any tailoring?
Yeah. Can I just say that like the one thing that sort of bothers me,
Hmm.
and I don't even know if it bothers me. So in the show, they make it really obvious. So the actor who plays Alina in the show on Netflix, Shadow and Bone, Jesse Maylee. So they are, I guess, Asian descent, and they use that in the TV show and say that she's half Shu,
Mm.
which is one of the countries that I guess is at war with, or like sort of pressing in on their country.
Ravka. Yeah, I
Rap,
think they said like I can't remember if it was the shoe that like take Grisha apart to see how they work or something like that. We talked about it last week.
right. Anyway, so I sort of really enjoy how like they add a racial undertone in the show, like
Hmm.
when she's at the camp originally at the very beginning, like the the cook doesn't want to serve her because
Yeah.
she's half Shu. And, the she just gets a lot of like racial slurs thrown at her.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm bringing it out now because the king says that she's plain,
Yeah.
but in the show it's a lot more like she's not plain, but
Mm-hmm.
she is like different.
Yeah.
Like she even looks different.
Yeah. And in the show, the first section where they're like Genya is going in to change how she looks a tiny bit. In the show, they're kind of like, maybe you should change her eyes, which is obviously very racially loaded.
Yeah.
And yeah, I definitely thought that it was, I really enjoyed that they added that
Yeah.
because, and Lee Bardugo has talked about it before. She's talked about it is a very white, or was a very white book, the first book in
Yeah.
the series. So she was happy that they did make it more racially inclusive because it was her first book and she says that she just didn't know any better at the time.
Yeah.
So I do enjoy that. I think there's a lot of talk about it. But I do think it added
another level to like, the whole book series, this whole book sort of centers around Alina feeling like she doesn't fit in with anybody except for Mal.
mhm,
And I find that sort of the racism
mhm.
of the Ravkins sort of added another layer to that. How
Yeah.
like nobody accepted her except for Mal.
Yeah. It definitely made her character more complex, and also it I think it's a better backstory
Yeah.
for the character for sure.
Mm.
Um yeah.
Anyway,
No,
good.
definitely definitely something to talk about. And I know we didn't bring it up in the first episode, I don't think, but I definitely think it deserves mentioning.
Yeah.
Um, so she's in front of the king now, and the darkling makes it dark with his dramatic clap. Um, I kind of, I'm kind of glad they didn't do the clap in the show, but at the same time, I think it would be hilarious to watch Ben Barnes just like standing up in front of the king and being like, just dramatic, huge claps all around. I
Like all I can think of is him doing this like big old clap way above his head,
100%. Every
and
time I
then
read
like
it.
and then slowly bringing his hands down around him to like signify that it's getting real low, like the sun's
It's
getting
getting
real low.
dark. It's getting dark in here. Yeah, it's wild in the book. I can't in the first time I read the book I was like, "Oh, that sounds normal." And then after seeing the show and reading the book again, I'm like, "Oh my god, I'm so glad they did not do that because that would look ridiculous."
But I love it.
Yeah. Um, so obviously he makes it dark with his clap, and then he uses I can't. No, I know what you're thinking. Stop thinking it. It's usually the clap after it's dark. Oh god. So it's dark. And he uses his amplifier powers, I guess, to get Alina to summon the sun power. She kind of stops fighting it this time, and it's definitely something that she notices herself. And obviously, it gets bright again, and the king is super excited. So
Yeah, well, they've been, I guess, waiting for a sun summoner for years and years and years, right?
yeah, well, ever since the fold came into
Yeah.
being, Jenya. gets her again after the display is all done. Genya comes and finds her and says that the queen wants to meet her. The queen's an interesting character, and I use interesting.
Not in a good way.
No. The queen is like happy that she's an orphan, and
I don't know if, like, that's not what I got from it. I just got that she was, like, so far removed from, like, Alina was like, oh, I guess the queen was like, oh, your parents must be so happy
Mhm.
and, like, that you're here. And she says, oh, well, no, I'm an orphan. And the queen is like, oh, marvelous. Like, not in a, I'm happy you're an orphan, but sort of, it makes a better story, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah.
orphan to riches than
Yeah.
like regular person to riches.
Well, yeah, like an orphan becoming the foretold, prophesized
Son
Harry
someday.
Potter.
Yeah. Yes. It is like Harry Potter,
Everything is Harry Potter.
but
Everything.
Slavic. It's Slavic Harry Potter.
Yes. Um, the queen also tells her not to let the court life change her like other people. It seems like this is a dig at Genya as well, which is like she's just getting it from all
Oh,
directions. It's
she
such
is
bullshit.
throwing shade.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, and we're gonna get into a little bit more with Jenya. Like, we're
Hmm.
going to sort of learn a little bit more about her situation. But yeah, she is in a very precarious situation at court.
Yeah. So, as soon as I guess her conversation with the queen is over and her and Genya leave, the Darkling finds her and they have a bit of a chat. And the Darkling calls the king a child. And it's a bit interesting based on what we find out about the Darkling later. But it's also, I guess, the first time that Alina's ever heard anyone say anything bad about the king because she is shook at best.
Yeah. Well, like, but we also know already, like, the Darkling, we've already had the age discussion, right? The Darkling has told her that he's like 100 years old.
Yeah, 120 or something. And he
Yeah.
looks to be her age, which I think
Yeah.
she's like, she a teenager?
I think she's like maybe 18, 19.
Yeah. So he looks to be her age and he's 120, I think it was. So, like,
So, like, it makes sense for him to call the king a child because the king's probably in his, like, what, 40s or 50s. So, like,
exactly. Yeah.
no matter what we learn about the Darkling, like,
Yeah.
the king is a child.
Well, yeah. Yeah. 40 to 120. That's,
Yeah.
um, so I guess they talk about the apparat for a second, and he is a priest of sorts, and the Darkling says that he's kind of a fanatic, um, which is just an interesting tidbit to get there. Um, the Darkling also tells her that he wants her to wear a black kefta. The only person to ever wear a black kefta is the Darkling. So wearing a black one would definitely be a show of some sort.
Yeah.
Support for him, and also just like it's a big deal. It would be a huge deal.
Yeah. It definitely
Uh,
shows off her, it would be a show of her, like, her power.
mhm. So she asks him for a blue kefta because blue is for the summoners. And she really doesn't want to be too different from everyone else. She's already worried about being so far behind everybody and like being the only one of her kind that she just doesn't want to do something else to make herself even more different. And he agrees.
Yeah, I think he's a bit disappointed.
Yes. Yeah. And Jenya is just like shocked by the whole conversation and basically tells Alina that because the Darkling obviously doesn't offer it lightly. He's not like, oh, you can have my color.
Yeah, it's a very big, like,
Honor.
yes.
It
And
should be seen as that.
yeah, especially since, the darkling, like everybody looks up to him, all the Grisha.
Hmm.
He created the little palace. He's the one that sort of started this idea of the second army and the Grisha serving the king because they were sort of seen in a bad light.
Hmm.
So all the Grisha are like, they sort of think of him as like he's everybody's father. He's actually their ruler.
Yeah.
So like for him to offer his color to some newbie,
Hmm.
like, is a
Yeah.
big deal.
And he's not only their ruler, but you can tell that they all have respect for him, and they all like, it's not, they know he's powerful and they have respect for him, and like you can tell that he deserves the following he has. So,
Yeah. He's put in a lot of work.
yes. Um Alina also, I guess, around this time kind of notices that all the servants in the palace are wearing the same color as Jenya. So I guess this is like the biggest sign that Jenya is below Grisha. She's wearing the same color as basically the maids in the palace. So it's definitely eye-opening to Alina, and she also can understand why Jenya was so kind of disappointed that she didn't accept the black robes.
Yeah.
They go back to Elena's room, and Alina invites Jenya to stay for supper. And it's kind of the start of their friendship because Jenya's like, "Oh, are you sure that you don't want to go eat with your own kind, i.e., a summoners? And like, this could be a mistake eating with me because she's lower standings wise. So if people see her, Alina, hanging out with Jenya, they might not appreciate it because
Yeah.
all of the Grisha stick to their own groupings. So Alina's just like, especially at this point, she's so new here. She just doesn't care. She wants a face that she knows. And she's like, she likes Jenya for who she is. And she just wants her to stay for supper and basically that to be it.
Yeah.
Jenya stays for supper, and then Alina gets her fittings done for her keftas. And Jenya says that Alina needs to get some rest because she gets to meet Bagra tomorrow. That's kind of all we get on that, but it's definitely an interesting point. Sounds scary.
Yeah. Bagra is a terrible name. I hope I don't ever have to meet somebody with the name Bagra. I just
Yes.
don't.
It reminds me of like Shira, but bag first. So it's like worse because Shira is just Shira because
It's a she.
she. So is
Mm.
she a bag lady?
Rah!
Is that what they're getting at? She's a bag lady, I guess.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. So Alina feels very alone here. And she's never had a room to herself before. And her uniform that she was wearing is so new and not at all lived in that she's just very, I think, kind of in shock. And kind of like we said earlier, the only place that she's ever felt like she belongs is with Mal. So, like, obviously, she's going to find this very hard.
Yeah, and again, like she's lived her life in poverty
Hmm.
essentially. Like even
Yeah.
when she was living at the orphanage, like obviously she wasn't sleeping on like silk bed sheets and like super fluffy beds. Like no,
No.
she was sleeping on like cots with one threadbare sheet. So like obviously now she's in this like luxurious
Hmm.
suite. There's all kinds of fancy things in this little palace that she's experiencing for the first time. So like I guess obviously it's going to make her a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, for sure. And like, it must be very weird going from your entire life having other people around and like that noise to a place where it's completely quiet. It's like
Yeah.
in the orphanage, she's in a room with different kids, and obviously in the army, they're in tents with multiple people. So it has to be a shock to the system.
Yeah.
Um, the next morning, her robes are delivered. Like, someone stayed up all night to make those because they took her, her measurements the night before, just before supper, and they're just ready in the morning. That seems
But that could have also been
wild.
like a fabricator could have had
True.
that done in like 5 minutes.
I guess, yeah. Yeah. Still. So yeah, she's not used to underclothes. So she is kind of trying to figure out how to put this clothes on. And I thought it was a bit of a funny scene because she just doesn't know what goes where. And I'm like, tried like obviously for us, underclothes is different than it probably is for them. But I'm like, it can't be that hard to figure out. But
Well, I guess like I feel like it would probably be the equivalent to us trying to figure out how to put on like a 17th century ball
yeah,
gown with
yeah.
like corset and stays and like
Hmm.
the undershirt and then like how many layers on your hoop and like
Bloomers.
yeah. So like that's what I think of.
Yeah, no, definitely me too. But it's just kind of funny
She's like looking at a
thinking
pair of pants and like, where do these go?
yeah. And it also isn't just another sign of like the difference between the first army and the second army, which we obviously get a lot of those. Um, Jenya comes back in the morning to bring her to breakfast, and she just kind of makes a comment that Alina would look better in black. Um,
Shade.
yeah, yeah, but I think it's kind of like cuter shade. Like it's not. I don't think she's trying to be mean, but she's like,
No.
if I were given this opportunity, I would not have acted like you did, basically.
Mm.
Um, Alina meets Marie and Nadia at breakfast. They come up to her and they kind of snub Jenya, which is unsurprising now that we've talked about how
A
people
little
treat her a
bit.
little more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the summoners are on the right basically side of the darkling's
Table.
table, but he doesn't even really eat there. And they make a huge deal about how like they're on the right, and then Alina's like, yeah, but the
Corporal.
corporalki are just on the left anyway, so you're just as close on either side. Like
Yeah.
she it doesn't really understand the craziness that is how knit in their own groups they are, because she's coming from outside. Like all these people were brought here when they were small children. I can understand why they feel so close knit, but like coming from the outside, I can definitely see that it kind of seems like brainwashing to be like
Yeah.
so in group and against everybody else.
Yeah. They're very like I want to say stuck up about their own
Hmm.
group. So like
Hmm.
all the corporalki think that they're the best. Um all the etherealki think they're the best. The materialki don't
I
really
think
care.
they just don't care.
They just don't care because they're so like wrapped up in what they're doing. They're
Hmm.
sort of like the tinkers and the inventors. So they're like super focused on whatever it is they're inventing at the time.
Yeah, that's
So
what it
like
seems like. Yeah.
it's very clicky,
Hmm.
right? It's
Yeah.
super clicky based on what sort of small science you can do,
Yeah.
aka magic.
Really though, it's fucking magic, guys.
It's fucking magic. Like, come on.
Yeah. So Alina is basically getting her breakfast, and there's just sugar on the tables, and she sees it and she's surprised because it's super rationed everywhere. But the Grisha kind of look at her a bit like she's crazy because they're like, oh, we have it all the time. And it's one of those other moments that you're like, oh, clearly there's different treatment here.
Yeah, she keeps. I will say that we don't really. Obviously, we're not talking about every single moment in the book, but Alina does bring up frequently, even up till now. As soon as she got to, the regular palace and even the little palace, how she sort of sees where the money in the money in the country is going. She's
Yeah.
like, she sort of makes comments like, well, I can see where our taxes are going. And like,
Yeah.
Obviously these people have not had to do without like
Mhm.
all the other villages and stuff. So like she's keenly aware.
Yeah. Yeah. She gets, I guess, grilled about the attack. People are kind of crowding her and asking her. Clearly, there have been a lot of rumors about what had happened, and she disappoints them, I guess, when she says that she passed out because she doesn't remember anything. She doesn't remember. This is back on the skiff when they were attacked by the Volcra. Um, she doesn't remember summoning the sun for sure because she still didn't think she could do it afterwards. So everybody's kind of disappointed in the story. They were like hoping it would be something cooler, but she's she's not the type to embellish anything, which I also appreciate as a character. I feel like if I was there, I'd be like, I could make this story better. Let me but then you wouldn't be able to like actually summon the sun. So I'd be like, well, that was dumb. um the Grisha are kind of obsessed with like surf fare, even though they have the sugar and they have the keftas, which are bulletproof, but they eat like smoked herring for breakfast and they eat what like the peasants would eat. And it just seems super silly. But I think we're told that it is kind of like on the Darkling's orders that they eat like this and act certain ways. Anyway,
it's
Alina,
it's
sorry.
it's super contradictory, isn't it?
Hmm.
Because like they're living in this fancy palace and like they wear the finest clothes. They never want for anything. They have no um they don't have rations on any sort of food items,
Hmm.
and like they're never cold, they're never hungry. But yet the darkling's like, oh, we need to eat like peasants because the peasants are the people we serve, and like we need
Hmm.
to act, we serve them, we're protecting them, so we need to be like them. But it's like, you're not though.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love Alina's perspective because clearly she has lived that life. And then she's like, this is ridiculous. Like, why are they acting like this? So, um, Jenya comes to meet Alina after breakfast and gives her a tour. The library, of course, sounds amazing. Just like
Hmm.
any book written by somebody who loves books, always has an amazing library.
Yeah, 100%.
Um, it's like key and it sounds amazing and I want to live there. So while they're in the library, Jenya mentions classes that Alina is going to be taking. And it's not the first time we kind of realize that Alina has a lot to catch up on, but it's definitely showing in all the things that she's going to need to do. So she has a lot to do.
Well, like, you got to think about it. Most of the Grisha get to that little palace when they're like 5 or 6.
Yeah. Because
She's
they do
like,
say she was tested when she was 8 or something, and they're like, that was old.
yeah.
So,
So she's like 12 years behind in
mhm.
lessons. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
That's literally like somebody that should be in grade 12 starting kindergarten.
Yeah. I can't.
So,
I can't at all imagine. That sounds awful.
yeah.
um, while Alina's kind of taking the tour, she wonders if Mal could come visit her and kind of wants to like see the place through his eyes. And she's wondering what he would think of everything. Which kind of just shows you that Mal really is forefront on her mind at all times, and her love for him, not even just like romantic love, but just like he's her home,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Um, the Corporalki have a specific area where they train. It's called the anatomy rooms. And I like Alina kind of mentions that she doesn't really want to know what happens there because she's a bit weary of heart renderers, which is kind of interesting, I think. Like, I get why.
Well, like when you think about it, they're anatomy rooms. They're just rooms full of dead bodies
Yeah.
so that they can open them up and see how they work.
Yeah.
So like somebody who's not at all familiar or
Hmm.
like that's not someone who doesn't have dead bodies normalized. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a
And
bit
yeah, she, like you said, is 12 years behind. So she has obviously heard rumors and stuff about heart renderers and has lived her whole life without being close to any, one would assume. So you can see why she's scared, but it's
yeah.
just funny, I think. The Materialki also have their own area where they kind of tinker and do their stuff. And we meet David, and he is a great metal worker, but he's not super into people and small talk. And Alina kind of thinks that Jenya has a crush on him, and like, so does the reader after they read that part. Jenya talks about rumors of new experiments with the corporalki and the fabricators. Um, I personally don't remember what that is or if it comes up, but definitely something that I'll keep in my head as we go through the book to see if there's
Yeah.
anything, when we read the next ones, just to see what that's all about. There's also a summoner's pavilion, which makes sense. Each different group of Grisha have their own area, but this is where the Etherealki train. It's an outdoor area next to a lake, which makes sense because obviously tide makers use water. And it's outdoors because fire and indoors don't really go together.
Valid point.
So Alina and Jenya are kind of outside, and there are kids just running around like it's a normal school. And Alina kind of thinks of how everything would be different if the Grisha testers had found her as a child. Like, there's the possibility that there would be no shadow fold by this point in her life. Like, if she was found at 5 years old, 12 ish years later, one would assume that she would have been able to harness her power and learn enough that maybe she could have gotten rid of the shadow fold. But then she's also like, she likely wouldn't know Mal anymore. Like, they would have obviously not seen each other since being 5. They wouldn't have developed the relationship that they did. And that kind of like makes her more okay with the way things turned out. So it's definitely interesting though, because if she was discovered when she was a child, the story would have been completely different.
Yeah.
Jenya also kind of gives us a bit of information about what Grisha do after they're done their schooling. So once they're old enough, basically they get sent off either to the front lines or kind of to protect high-ranking houses, it seems like. The best Grisha are allowed to stay at the school and they continue their training and they stay in the Darklings Legion. So that's like the highest honor, is being asked to stay with the Darkling,
Yeah.
which again just shows you like what kind of leader he is, and everybody wants to stay around him. Jenya brings Alina to Bagra's hut and just like ghosts her. She just leaves her and she's like,
I don't want to
Alina's
be
like, what?
around.
Yeah, Jenya's just like, I'm outie. And Alina's like, what do I do now? So she knocks on the door a few times and like no one answers. So she's just like, I guess I'll just go in. She at first doesn't really see anybody in there. And then she kind of sees in some shadows that there's somebody there. And her first instinct is that this lady is very old. But then when she looks closer, she doesn't really have any of the like conventional old person traits. Like her skin is super smooth and her hair isn't gray. So she's like, oh, she's not old. I don't know why I thought that, but it's just an interesting
Yeah, she comes
thing.
across as old without looking old.
Yeah. Um, her first sentences to Alina seem kind of sarcastic and like almost aggressive for no reason. Like, you're like, why? Like, she doesn't even want to be here. So why are you being a jerk to her?
Yeah, it's true.
It's like every other book that we've read where nobody wants to use honey.
Yeah, no one wants to be nice to anybody.
Yeah. So Bagra asks if Alina's going to save them all. And Alina's just like, I don't even think I want to be here. Like, this is, I just want to give up. Bagra also comments that Alina is scrawny and that she hopes she's stronger than she looks. Bagra grabs her arm, and she is also an amplifier. And basically, she does her whole lesson, and then she's like, "That was a disaster. Like, Alina can't call her magic on her own, and she just doesn't know what she's doing," which is unsurprising. She's basically
She
an
doesn't.
adult now, and
Yeah.
she never learned it. So why would she? Um, she goes back for lunch at the little palace, and Marie and Nadia are trying to be her like new best friend because she's the new and shiny thing around.
Yeah.
And you kind of get into during this conversation a bit of what like other Grisha her age are studying, and a lot of it is like languages for potential places that they could be sent and different things like that. So it's very evident again how far behind Alina is. Um, Alina walks to combat training with Marie and Nadia, and the apparate is just outside, just like creeping.
Yeah, he's a creepy old man.
Yeah, it's just another point in the like, why are you acting so creepy? Do you just not notice it? Like,
Maybe he just doesn't understand social cues.
maybe. At combat training, we meet Bodkin, and he's the teacher, and he's not Grisha, which I thought was very interesting, and I really actually liked it because it shows that the Grisha kind of get the best, and even if it isn't another Grisha, they're always going to like have the best training possible. So I enjoyed that, but then it's also like they know that their talents aren't necessarily fighting without small science slash magic. So getting somebody that is obviously good at combat because they've had to do it is smart.
Yeah.
Basically everybody does combat training, so it doesn't matter what grade level. I don't really know what they call them, but everybody has to do combat training. And Alina is predictably awful.
But like, this is what bothers me. Like, what do they expect? She's
Yeah,
literally been there for a day and she's training with students that are her age. And like, obviously, she's gonna be awful. What did they expect out of her?
yeah. He does make a comment though that she's like in the first army, but like she's a cartographer. She's never been
Yeah,
she's never really been battling. She's there to
no.
like make maps. So she has to spar with Bodkin, of course, because everybody else already has partners. And he calls her little girl because she's so weak, which like again, why is everybody so mean? Like,
But also, like, we sort of already know this about her, that she's like sort of, I don't know if sickly is the right word, like she never sleeps enough and she's got
mhm,
permanent like bags under her eyes and like
yeah.
she never eats. Like, we know this about her already. So like, obviously she's weak and scrawny.
Yeah. Um, the one, I guess, upside about combat training is you're not allowed to use your powers during it. So Alina kind of sees this as a blessing since she can't call hers at all. So she'd be kind of screwed anyway.
Makes sense.
Bodkin tells her to come to class early the next day so that she can kind of get some more training in because, like we said, she's obviously behind. Um, which I kind of thought was nice of
Mm,
him. It's definitely a show of what his character could be.
yeah.
Um, at supper, Alina asks where Jenya is, and Marie and Nadia tell her that she eats at the palace because the queen wants her available. And she also sleeps there because the king wants her available as well. And
Dun dun dun.
yeah, so that's like when we actually get kind of the we had it was a bit alluded to before when
Yeah.
Jenya talked about how the king loves beauty, but like we actually get it here and yeah, not great.
No. And it's I don't even on like obviously I know how she does it, but it's amazing how with just a few sort of well-placed scenes and well-placed dialogue, we automatically know that it is a one-sided infatuation. Like
Mhm.
Jenya's not sleeping at the palace because her and the king are in love and having an affair. Like
Yes.
it is very obvious that she goes to the king when he wants her
Mhm.
because she has to. And
Yeah.
it is very clear when it's discussed that it is not a voluntary, like she's not doing it because she wants to.
Yeah. But the shitty thing is Marie and Nadia are like gossiping about it and
Yeah.
don't care about Jenya. So it's like as readers we know and like I'm sure Marie and Nadia know that it's not something that she wants, but they still are like see her as less because of it, which is just so
Yeah.
ridiculous.
It's slut shaming is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like but like not even that. It's like shaming rape victims,
Yeah. It's wild.
right?
Yeah.
That's what it's like. But I feel like they sort of breed it in this sort of environment they're in. It
Mhm.
breeds dislike and distrust
Yeah.
of other Grisha. Like they don't like interacting with each other. They don't like talking to each other. They
Yeah.
tend to stay within their own little groups.
Yeah, for sure. So during supper, the doors behind the Darkling's table open, and Ivan comes to get Alina and brings her to a war room where the Darkling is. So Ivan's a bit of a sarcastic jerk here, but then in the show, he's like even more so. In the show, at one point, I think she's having her supper, and then it's Ivan who's like, I don't know why you're here eating. You should be working day and night to get rid of the fold, basically. So he's even more of an asshole in the show, at least to this point. Um, but anyway, in the book, she goes and the Darkling just asks her about her first day, and she's just like, "Is this all we're doing here? We're having a conversation about my first day?" And he says that he knows it'll likely be harder for her since she is the only one of her kind. And she's like, yeah, and also I'm 15 years behind, basically.
Yeah.
So she's kind of just like, is this really happening? Like, the Darkling definitely doesn't ask all the kids around here how their first day was. Um, he tells her how to get back to her dormitory from there in like a back way so that she doesn't have to go back out and talk to everybody. And she is just like, that's it. That's all you wanted. And they have a bit of banter back and forth, which is kind of like showing their relationship evolve. And I guess the Darkling notices that she's rubbing her palm. And she says that it's a habit. She didn't even realize that she was doing it at that time. And she has a scar there. And he asks where she got it. And she just says Karamzin. Um, and the darkling asks if the tracker is also an orphan, and she responds yes. And he asks if the tracker is any good. And she's super distracted by the darkling's touch at this point. But she does say that he is. It's a bit of breadcrumbing here that we don't
Yes.
really get back to for a little bit.
Um, so after this meeting with the Darkling, she goes back to her room, she goes to bed, and obviously she wakes up sore and achy. She's working out, she's working muscles she didn't really know existed. So she's doing a heck of a lot. So obviously she wakes up sore. It's like what happens after you wake up after the first like day of a new exercise
Mm-hmm.
routine.
Yep.
Um, but so she wakes up sort of achy, but she's decided to like commit to training every day, to being the summoner, because she realizes that she can't really go back to being a cartographer. And she's sort of starting to think along the lines of, well, if I can learn to control my power, then we could destroy the Shadowfold. And she's thinking about how much good she can do for the soldiers and the trackers, aka Mal, how she can keep
Imagine.
how she can keep them safe, because obviously the biggest struggle for them is, one, the wars, but two, crossing the Shadowfold is a huge it's a huge problem that they all have to do in order to get trade goods.
Mm-hmm.
So she's saying, well, if the fold isn't there, it'd be so much easier to trade, and like it would keep a lot of people safe. However, as the days and the weeks go on, she can't summon her power, and she sucks at combat. So, you know, Bagra's getting frustrated with her. Like, she goes to see her every day, and Bagra's sort of like threatening to cut her again, because remember when she first goes to the Darkling's tent, like at the very beginning, to try and discover her power, the Darkling cuts her arm, right, to help
Yeah.
release power.
Yeah.
So Bagra's like, well, is that what I need to do to get you to
Mm-hmm.
get your power coming? And Botkin is also like calling her out and saying like, you're too skinny, you lack muscle, blah, blah, blah.
Like, tell her how to fix it. Don't just yell at her.
But like
Tell
he
her
does.
for protein. Yeah.
But like he does. He says like, you need to eat.
Yeah. Which,
But she doesn't.
yeah.
Like, she totally has an eating issue. She never eats. She
Yeah.
doesn't really sleep. So, she sort of says, like, I don't know why, but, like, she's sickly because she doesn't eat or sleep.
Yeah.
Bagra thinks that her inability to sleep and eat and stuff has to do with her failure to call her power. Like, she's like, you're using every bit of strength in you to fight your power from coming about. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, that's what you need to work on. And I think she sort of like ignores it at first. She's like, I think you're fibbing.
Well, she's like, I'm trying so hard. There's
Yeah.
no way that's true.
Yeah. Her sort of lack of success is making other Grisha sort of talk about her.
Mm-hmm.
So, she didn't want to stand out anyway, but it seems like now she is sort of standing out, but for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Darkling on top of all that is ignoring her.
Very Harry Potter book 5.
Very Harry Potter book 5, yes. 100%. But I guess the Darkling is the same. Like, it's not a I'm ignoring you because I'm mad at you sort of way. It's a I just have a shit ton of stuff to do today sort of way.
Mm-hmm.
When Alina isn't training, she is studying Grisha history, which sounds super interesting. Note the sarcasm.
Mm-hmm.
we get a little bit more now about how the Grisha use their powers. So again, we sort of discussed this at the beginning when we talked about the different types of Grisha. So they are born with the ability to manipulate matter at its smallest part. So they don't have magic. They can just manipulate atoms and molecules. So, for example, Marie is a summoner. So Marie is one of Alina's quote unquote friends.
Yeah, question
uh,
mark.
Question mark? Like, I don't know if they're actually friends, but they eat together. So
Yeah.
she is a Inferni, and so again, she doesn't summon the fire. She summons the combustibles in the air, but she still needs a spark. So we sort of get a little bit more into like the exact science of Grisha,
Of
which
the
I could
small science.
of the small science. Yes, I could honestly do without it.
Yeah, it's
Like
very deep. I
yeah,
don't know. It's a lot.
we've discussed before when we did Discovery of Witches how like I'm not a fan of the science lessons. Like I don't want
Hmm.
to feel like I'm back at school, please.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she's in the library one day, and the apparate comes over, and he's pretty creepy. Like you've already said that he's a pretty big creep, but he's an extra creep. So he gives her this like book of fairy tales and says that all Grisha children get this book of fairy tales. It's like something they all get and they all read. So he's trying, like, it sort of confuses me because his actions are trying to be inclusive and kind,
Hmm.
but like it just maybe shows that he really doesn't understand social cues because he's like, she is really creeped out by him.
Yeah.
He also tries to be like, "Oh, I want to be friends." And she's like, "I am super creeped out. I'm running away now." So she like is like, "Oh, okay, I got to go. Bye." And just like zooms out of there like as fast as she can.
She's like, "You're an old man. Leave me alone."
Yeah, it's like if the Pope was like hanging around and like hovering and like staring at you from across the room without blinking. Like it's
Yeah.
that sort of scenario. After she left, though, she sort of thought back about it and was like, I wonder, like, she sort of thought he maybe was trying to like warn her about something.
Hmm.
Another little breadcrumb, maybe. Um, we learn that she misses Mal, obviously, like, she literally thinks about him nonstop. So she's been writing to him every single week. So she's been there for like a few weeks now, like maybe even a couple of months. And she's writing to him every single week, but has not heard back. But she's writing to him through the care of his regiment. So that's what they call it. So she's essentially putting his name on the letter, but she's mailing it to, I guess, his regiment as a whole.
Hmm.
And then hoping that when it gets to the base, wherever they are, they'll pass it on to him.
Hmm.
Because obviously he's in the military. He doesn't have an address.
Yeah.
um, she sort of is feeling like, as of right now, so we've discussed, she can't call her power no matter how hard she tries. She sucks at combat. And, you know, she's not really making friends because that's not. It's sort of like what the queen said when she first got to court. Like, I hope that court doesn't affect you like it does, or doesn't change you the way it does some people. Like,
Hmm.
she's not that type of person that survives at court. Like, she's not that double talk,
Yeah.
um, like backstabbing, like political intrigue sort of individual.
Hmm.
So she's not really like, she doesn't feel like she's fitting in. So like
Yeah.
she is Grisha, but she doesn't really feel Grisha. One day, a group of Grisha come back to the little palace. So I guess for the Grisha, anyway, the little palace is like home for them,
Mhm.
right? So they have rooms. They've been there since they were small children. So this is like their home. So a group of them came back from the front lines. And it was the group that was originally with them when they were going to cross the fold, when Alina and Mal were going to cross the fold. Um, in that group was Zoya. So Zoya was a blue kefta de Grisha that flirted with Mal. She sort of stuck her head out of her carriage and sort of like gave him sexy eyes. Uh, and Alina sort of assumes that Mal went to her tent, went to Zoya's tent the night before they were supposed to cross the shadow fold and like
Mhm.
had sex with her. Um, so Marie and Nadia, who Alina has been sitting with this whole time, they sort of say, oh, like she's super full of herself and she thinks she's better than everyone else and blah, blah, blah. But they also say that it's sort of earned because she's a super powerful squaller. So she's like one of those people that can control the air pressure.
Mhm.
Alina says, oh, yeah, she's also like super beautiful, which sucks for Alina because, again, she thinks that this girl and Mal had sex. So she's like, obviously, this is the kind of gal Mal wants.
Yeah.
Um, so she went over to talk to all of them. And like, it's that super fake, like, oh my God, hi, I haven't seen you in ages. I missed you so
Mm.
much. Like, it's that sort of a greeting.
Yeah.
And like, you can obviously tell that that's super fake. And then when she meets Alina, she's super nice to her, like out loud. But then she whispers in her ear that she stinks of Karemzin. So she obviously knows that that's where she grew up and is like being a total bitch about it.
Yeah.
Um, Alina sort of like has this in her mind all day, and Zoya sits at her table with the rest of the summoners and is sort of like telling everybody stories about her trips and also like making subtle digs at Alina all the time,
Mm.
which sucks. Like, she's a straight up bitch.
Yeah.
Um, at lunch, Alina notices that she has a bracelet that's made of silver and it has a bone embedded in it. And she realizes that she has an amplifier. So she's one of the very few Grisha that has an amplifier.
Mhm.
Um, they all go to their combat lesson after lunch, and Zoya shows up and like kisses Botkin, like they have a hug, and it's like, oh hi. Botkin is like, oh my God, she's my star student. And then Zoya turns around and spoke to another girl in fluent Shu. So Alina sort of is feeling really
Less than.
low and less than, and like that this Zoya girl can do anything.
Mhm.
Because in her mind, she can. Like, in her mind now, she's slept with Mal. She's a super powerful summoner. Um, she has a amplifier. She can speak different languages. She's an amazing combatter. Like, she just thinks that she literally can do everything.
Mhm.
Botkin, the dumbass, pairs up Zoya and Alina, saying that maybe Zoya could help the little girl, quote unquote.
Mm.
And it's like, dude, seriously, you're a dummy.
Yeah.
Like, you are literally a moron.
It's a terrible plan. I'm sure it'll go great.
Yes. Zoya is like obviously super jealous of Alina. We don't really get why yet because she doesn't know her at all, but she's super
Mhm.
jealous. Um, they start fighting, and the fight is going Zoya's way, obviously. Um, she has way more training. This is the part that I find so not believable because Alina sort of manages to take her down like by
Mhm.
luck. But like there's no way. I'm sorry. If you were training for like 10 years in combat, I just can't see a scenario where Alina would have won.
I think it's more that Zoya underestimates her and she did learn something before now. Like that's the only way that it possibly makes sense is that she did learn how to use like where she's so small, bigger opponents shit against them. I don't know. It's kind of what she says, but like I agree. It's hard to imagine that.
Right. Anyway, so Alina managed to take her down by luck. Zoya got pissed that this newbie managed to take her down. So she used her squalor power to fling Alina across the room so she hit the opposite wall and like really hurt herself.
Yeah.
And rightfully so, Bakken got pissed at Zoya for using power.
Mhm.
Like you said earlier, they're not allowed to use their Grisha power during combat lessons. Um, Alina ended up with like at least one broken rib and like a concussion. She fainted and had to get taken to her room on a stretcher. Like, or not her room, sorry. She was taken to like the infirmary on a stretcher. Like she was hurt badly.
Yeah. It seems wild that they're like, "Oh, he's mad at Zoya." Like this is assault. This
Yes,
is not like
100% assault.
I know that
Uh,
you're in combat training, but like you had no right to use magic, so this
no.
is 100% assault.
Yeah. Um so when she wakes up, like obviously she's healed, but she's still in the sort of the infirmary.
Hmm.
Marie and Nadia are there to be like, "Oh my god, are you okay? Let's gossip about what happened to Zoya."
Yeah.
So apparently Zoya, we don't really know what happened, and this sort of bothers me because I would really like. I understand there's a point to it because um, our point of view is with Alina, so we're not
Hmm.
getting any other points of view. But
Yeah.
I would love to know what happened to Zoya. She went into the Darkling's room, and when she came out, she was crying.
Yeah.
And apparently it said that she was just pissed off because and jealous because she is not the Darkling's favorite anymore because she is not the savior.
Yeah.
So like I sort of wish we could have been like a fly on the wall for that conversation, and I hope Zoya got her just desserts. I hate her guts. She's such a bitch.
Mm. Yeah.
Um so after sort of hearing about what happened, Alina went back to sleep. And she woke up again, and the apparate is now at the door to the infirmary to chat. And like again, super creepy. Like the dude needs to take a class
Hmm.
on how not to be creepy. um the apparat sort of tells her that like people close to the border are starting to make shrines out of you, and you sort of as a person are representing hope and faith, and apparently that's really dangerous, and that she is becoming dangerous because when you hold hope and faith, obviously you hold like a nation, right?
Hmm.
um Apparently then like so she sort of gets up to go get a glass of water, I guess, and like he gets really creepy and like reaches for her, after he says that, like, oh, people are making shrines for you. And then he tries to, like, grab her hair. So she, like, freaks out and drops the glass she was holding. And, like, yes, of course you do.
Yeah. He's too creepy. I do not like.
He is amazingly creepy.
Yeah. 0 out of 10. Do not recommend.
Um, After she breaks the glass, he, like, melts in the shadows and disappears. He's just gone. And then, like, a guard comes and, like, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, sorry, I just broke a glass. But, like, where did he go?
Yeah.
Anyway, so once she's alone again, she sort of really takes to heart that Ravka, like, the people have an enormous amount of faith in her, and that she's really failing the entire country by failing her in her training. And that's such a huge sort of, like, it's such a huge ask, like, of an 18, 19-year-old girl,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, it's just something that you shouldn't ask of anyone,
Yeah.
right? To save a whole nation. I
Yeah.
would not have been able to deal with the pressure.
No, for sure.
Anyway, once she gets back to her room and out of um out of the infirmary, uh she tells Jenya about the apparate and how, like, a creepy he was, and she sort of just dismisses it, and she's like, oh, he's just like a pious old man, like, he doesn't know what he's talking about, just leave him alone and he'll leave you alone, essentially.
Mm.
So Alina then says, like, hey, I've got a favor to ask you. I need you to check, like, I need you to look for Mal for me. So she thinks it's really weird that he has not sent her one letter back. She sent him like 5 or 6 letters at this point,
Mm-hmm.
at least. And she says it's really weird that he would not have written her back. So she's starting to think the worst about him. Like, maybe he's not alive anymore. Maybe he's across the fold. Like, there are so many things that could be wrong with him, but she wants to know for sure. And she doesn't sort of really understand how to go about getting that information, but Jenya does.
Mm-hmm.
So Jenya sort of says, yeah, okay, like, I'll do that for you, but you should look at the casualty lists. So I guess every so often they update the list and list off the people that died, so people can sort of have um, comfort, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she was like, check that list and then we'll see if he's there. If he's not, then I'll look into getting you the information you need. But she also says, I'm only going to do this unless you let me fix your dark circles. And I would be like, yes.
Like, please do at all times.
Right? Like, that wouldn't even be a challenge for me. Um, so it sort of shows us that she's starting to trust Jenya. Like, she didn't ask anybody else about this, even though she probably spends more time with Marie and
Nadia.
Nadia. But it's more like she's close with Jenya. She sort of spends the day in her room. She can't really focus. She says that, she hates being different. She hates being Grisha because she can't seem to, like, be Grisha. So it's like they say she's Grisha, but she doesn't feel like it. And she hates it. So she's really struggling to find her place here. She goes the next day to training with Bagra and finds the darkling in Bagra's little hut. And they are arguing, which is, I guess, an interesting development because everybody seems to find the darkling really, like, calm. Like, he's abrupt, but he's calm.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone's sort of like, Alina's sort of like, whoa, what's going on here? Because it's not usual for the darkling to be arguing. Um, Alina is surprised because Bagra calls the darkling boy and like treats him like any other student she had. She doesn't treat him special just because he's a darkling. She treats him the way any other student would be treated. And I love that. I love Bagra.
Yeah.
She's a bitch, but I love her.
Bitch with a terrible name, but
Yeah, bitch with a terrible name, but I love her anyway. The Darkling sort of says why he's there. He says he wanted to get Alina an amplifier, saying that, that would help you with your power. Alina, like, loves the idea because, again, she only knows how to use her power essentially when an amplifier amplifies it. So she's not using it at all. But she likes the feeling of using it, right? Like she likes this feeling of surety and this
mhm.
warmth that is her light. And she loves the feeling bubbling up and then eventually bursting forth out of her. So she thinks that the amplifier will really help her be able to control her power. Uh, so Alina loves the idea. Bagra hates it.
Yeah.
Hates it. And like, as of right now, she's not giving anyone a reason why.
Mhm.
She's just like, this is a terrible idea. Um, the Darkling says that he wants to get Morozsova's stag. So it's an ancient, powerful stag. So some people don't believe that it even exists because it's sort of a fairy tale. Other people obviously believe in it, but it's a super mystical, magical stag.
Yeah.
He says he wants to use the antlers into a necklace for Alina for her to wear all the time. She's here for it.
Which
Um,
makes sense with how hard she's trying and it's just
yeah,
not working. Like I'd accept that too. I'd be like, "Yes, this is what I need.
yeah.
Done with it."
Um, she says that she doesn't believe that the stag can be found at this point because it's never been found. Like it doesn't even people don't even have confirmation that it exists. Yet they all think that they're gonna find it. So she's like, it's not happening. Nobody's gonna find it. She says that to the Darkling. She's like, I don't believe that we're gonna find it. Like it's such a rare animal. And he says, oh, we're gonna find it because it's meant for you, Alina. Like, so he's saying that this particular amplifier is meant for her. Nobody else can have it but her. So he's sort of like, I want you to trust me, and like, I want us to sort of have this shared partnership.
Mhm.
Um, so Alina goes to the library to read up on amplifiers. We haven't really gotten a whole lot about them right now, other than the fact that, there's a couple of people that wear them, there's a couple of people that are them. So we learned that a Grisha can only have one amplifier in their lifetime. And once the amplifier is bonded with a Grisha, no other Grisha can use it. So Zoya's bracelet,
Mhm.
nobody else can use that as an amplifier. They can use it as like a decorative element, but nobody else can use that. So if she gets the stag horns and makes them into a necklace, not one single person can say anything to her about it because it's hers.
Yeah.
Um, we sort of get like, it's not even a montage, but it's sort of like a passing of the season sort of thing. And she ends up being there for winter-ish. I said winter is coming. She
I
sort
didn't
of,
watch that either, so
do you know what? I watched like bits and pieces of it,
Mm,
like on purpose. I purposefully avoided the really gross stuff, but I did watch a little bit.
yeah.
Anyway, I guess the promise of this amplifier has her sort of giving up on training. she's sort of like, well, what's the point in trying? They're going to get me the amplifier and I'm going to be able to be awesome with it. So I'm not going to try. She says, I'm just going to wait for the amplifier and hope that it makes me Grisha.
Mm-hmm.
And she says she sort of feels like a fraud, which I totally understand. Like, people keep telling her that she's special and that she has this amazing power, but she has not been able to use it. So I totally understand why she feels like a fraud, why she
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel like she should get this sort of get into this like exclusive club, right? She
Mm-hmm.
feels like she hasn't done anything to be worthy of getting in.
Yeah.
I guess she sort of hears from Jenya at this point that Mal is okay. So apparently she like writes her a little note and says Mal's listed as fine. He's listed as being in the regiment. So if you want to write to him, that's what you should do. Write to his regiment. And she's like, oh, but that's what I've been doing this whole time.
Yeah.
So obviously he is getting her letters, but in a not in the right way. And she is allowed, she's pissed. Because she sort of was thinking at first, oh, maybe he's busy. That's why he hasn't written me back. Well, maybe the letters are getting lost. Oh, well, oh
Mm-hmm.
my God, what if he's hurt? Like, all of these things are running through her head. And then she gets noticed that, no, he's okay. So now she feels like he's ignoring her,
Mm-hmm.
which is like the worst thing that the person that you care for most in the world can do,
Yeah. And
right?
like we said earlier, he's her home basically.
Yeah.
And he clearly cares so little that she just envisions him getting her letters and being like, oh my God, would she just stop?
Yeah. That's what she thinks he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially she thinks that he is like ignoring her. So this is when we sort of get our flashback to the day her and Mal were tested by the Grisha. So this was the very first thing we discussed the last episode, is that there are two kids wandering around, eavesdropping on the conversation, and a red, a purple, and a blue Grisha are there. And this is sort of the stupidest thing I find is they literally forcibly remove the children from each other to be tested. And they're like kicking and screaming and fighting in order to get tested. And it's like, why didn't you just do it? Like, why did they have to leave the room of each other? Why couldn't they stay in the room?
Yeah.
It
You're
just
just scaring
seems,
the kids.
yes, it just seems silly. Anyway, so in the flashback, Alina is tested, and apparently she feels her power wash over her, and it says it feels like she's about to break the surface of it, everything, and her lungs are like aching for air, and she hears Mal sort of like yelling for her, and there's fighting and screeching and everything, and she knows that her power is sort of struggling to get free. And it sort of said she also knows that if it's freed, her Mal will never get to be together again. So she chooses uh, to push it down. She said that she did that because Mal was her whole world. He is the one bright spot she had. And if she was taken, then she wouldn't have Mel anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So she chose to bury her power every day. And every day she's been struggling to keep it under control without realizing it. So essentially, Bagro was right
Yeah.
that whole
Imagine.
time, right? Apparently, that night that she was tested, the next morning, that was the first day that the dark circles appeared under her eyes, was the day after her test. So that sort of indicates that this was the first day that she started struggling to keep her power in check. I don't understand how she couldn't decide. Like, I don't understand how she could not figure out the correlation between the two events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She said that, like, she did say that she forgot about that moment until just then. And it's like, that's very convenient.
Yeah, it is very
Like,
convenient.
you can't, you can't just be forcing something down day in, day out and not notice it, especially when you're actively trying to call them small science, not magic, whatever. It's fucking magic.
Yeah.
But you're actively trying to call this power. You can't. And then 2, 3, I don't know, months later, you're like, holy shit, I've been forcing it down every day. It's like,
Yeah, you would
you're
think.
very not in touch. Maybe you should try meditation. Like,
Yeah. Anyway, I feel like she should have thought of that before. Anyway, she then thinks that Mal has left her behind and that he didn't even think she was worthy of writing back to him. So she's sort of like, why am I holding on to somebody who's not holding on to me? So she agrees to let him go. So she's like, if he doesn't want me, then I'm going to go out and I'll make my own way in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And after sort of admitting this, all of a sudden she can finally call her sunlight.
Yeah.
And that's the end of chapter 12.
Yeah. Kind of a nice ending.
Yeah, I like that she's starting to feel sort of empowered within her work.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like it's not just
it's probably good for her not to be so dependent on one person in her entire life.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a good step for her character.
100%.
Yeah. So that wraps it up for this week. If you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in any of our episodes, or if you have any book suggestions, you can email us at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com. And be sure to check us out on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Coffee and Co Read.
Yeah, so next week we're going to be reading chapters 13 to 17 of Shadow and Bone. So make sure to follow along. And if you're enjoying our little chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you find content. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you on the next page.